Hello and welcome to Mrs. Starling's channel. Today's story is about a serial killer. It took place in the early 1900s when cities were still small, populations were modest, and life centered around close-knit communities where everyone knew their neighbors by name. So, how could a serial killer murder 36 girls in the same city where he lived? Now, let's dive into our story. In the year 1906 in Morocco, specifically in the city of Marrakesh, something strange began happening in Marrakech. Something the residents of this once safe city were not accustomed to. Young girls started disappearing without a trace. In just 1 month, 15 girls had vanished, disappearing in broad daylight. As a result, girls were no longer allowed to go out alone to run errands, buy household necessities, or visit friends and family as they once did. The people of the city lived in terror. It was a frightening situation. Women were forced to stay at home and only venture out when accompanied by a brother, father, or a husband. However, during this period in 1906, specifically in February, the political unrest in Marrakesh was at its peak. So the police paid no attention to reports of missing girls, which only worsened the situation. When families reported missing daughters, the police would respond by saying, "The responsibility lies with the parents for their daughter's disappearance. Girls shouldn't be going out alone." So, with the police neglecting their duties, rumors began to spread. Some believed that the colonial authorities were behind the kidnappings, while others blamed merchants who came to Marrakesh for trade. Some even turned to sorcerers and charlatans for help in finding their daughters. There were even those who believed that a jinn was responsible for abducting the girls. Remember, this story took place in 1906, so people were able to believe in superstitions. As the time passed, 3 months went by and the number of missing girls reached 35. Imagine, no girl dared to leave her home for any reason. Everyone was terrified. If a girl did leave her home alone, her return was unlikely. In May, the truth began to surface. When Khadija, an 18-year-old girl, wanted to go out to buy some necessities, but her mother stopped her because of the girl's kidnapping. Khadija went out against her mother's wishes, convincing her that she would be careful and that the place she was going to was nearby. After half an hour, her mother began to worry. Khadija hadn't returned. She immediately informed the neighbors, who in return went to her father. The father's name is Khalid, and told him. So Khalid rushed to the police station. But as we said, the police were indifferent. Families who had lost their daughters before had received no help from the police whatsoever. So Khalid decided to take matters into his own hands and search for his daughters himself. He informed the neighbors and asked for their help. He began walking through the streets and alleys, asking if anyone had seen or encountered his daughter. Eventually, he met one of her friends who told him that Khadija had been seen talking with an old woman named Rahala. This was the last time Khadija was seen alive. Who was Rahala? Rahala was a 70-year-old woman known to the neighbors in the area. As an elderly woman living alone, she was respected by the neighbors, who often helped her. She was generally kind and well-mannered towards the neighbors and was well known in the community. Khalid, the father, immediately went to Rahala's house. Someone he knew well. He confronted her, asking, "Where is my daughter Khadija?" She replied, "I don't know your daughter, and I don't know what she looks like." He described his daughter to her and told her that his daughter's friend has seen Khadija speaking with her just 4 hours earlier. Rahala became flustered and insisted she didn't know anything. So Khalid asked her again, saying, "She was talking to you, and I want to know what have you spoke about." At this point, she began to stumble over her words. Unable to give a clear answer, she changed her story multiple times. Khalid acted calmly and invited her to his home under the pretext of introducing her to his wife, Khadija's mother, who was desperate for answers. And the woman agreed and went with him. Once they arrived, Khalid called the neighbors and relatives. When a large crowd had gathered, he said to them loudly, "This woman is the last person who saw my daughter. She is hiding something about her disappearance and the disappearances of other girls. I am 100% sure of it, but she is denying it." The crowd, enraged, tied the woman's hands and feet and began beating the soles of her feet with sticks. Rahala screamed in pain, begging them to stop. When she couldn't no longer bear the pain, she finally said, "Stop, please stop. I will tell you where your daughter is." She confessed and said, "I was carrying some bags in my hands when I ran into your daughter. I asked her to help me carry them because I was tired and couldn't manage on my own. Khadija was very kind and helped me carry the bags to the cobbler's shop, Hajj Al-Masfiwi, where I wanted to pick up my repaired shoes." The crowd was stunned. Hajj Al-Masfiwi was a man in his 50s, known to be a pious and helpful person. He was the one people turned to when they needed help with writing official letters because many couldn't read or write at that time. Rahala continued, admitting that she had been luring girls to Hajj Al-Masfiwi shop. She would use her age and weakness as an excuse, claiming she needed help. Once the girls were inside the shop, she would offer them juice, which she had laced with a strong sedative. When the girls were unconscious, Al-Masfiwi would steal the gold they were wearing, carry them to the backyard of the shop, stab them to death, and dispose of their bodies in the well located there. Khalid and the others took the wicked old woman Rahala to the police station. At the station, she continued her confession. She explained that there was an agreement between her and Al-Masfiwi. She would bring the girls to his shop or even to his home. If they were wearing gold or anything valuable, they would drug them by adding a sedative to their juice, steal their belongings, and then Al-Masfiwi would kill them in a horrifying manner. He would stab their faces repeatedly until their features were unrecognizable, and then dispose of the bodies. Rahala's method of luring the girls was simple. She would pretend to be carrying heavy shopping bags and ask for help. Once the girls agreed, she would invite them into the shop or Al-Masfiwi's home to thank them and offer them the drugged juice, and the rest was left to Al-Masfiwi. The difference was that at his home he would bury the bodies in the backyard, while at the shop he would throw them into the well. After Rahala's confession, the police surrounded Al-Masfiwi's shop and arrested him. That day, the city fell into complete disorder. The families of the victims stormed the cobbler's shop, demanding Al-Masfiwi's execution. The entire community, including neighboring villages, stood in solidarity with them. Al-Masfiwi confessed to all crimes. He admitted to killing the girls and dumping some of the bodies in the well behind the shop. When forensic experts arrived and investigated, they found 20 bodies in the well, and At his home, they found 16 more bodies buried in the backyard. The families identified the victims by their clothing and gave them proper burial. As we mentioned, the people of Marrakesh demanded his execution. In 1906, the ruler at the time was Sultan Abdulaziz bin Al-Hussein, and the families of the victims formally requested that the serial killer Hajj Al-Masfiwi to be publicly executed without delay, allowing all the people of Marrakesh to witness his punishment due to the horrific nature of his crimes. The Sultan agreed to their demands. However, diplomatic representatives whose influence was growing day by day objected the execution, considering it too brutal. Protests erupted in the streets daily, with thousands of people demanding Al-Masfiwi's execution. The authorities, unable to ignore the public outrage, devised a punishment that would humiliate him before his final fate. The police tied him to a donkey and forced him to walk through the streets of Marrakesh every day, exposed to the fury of the crowd. People spat on him, threw garbage and stones at him. In his hand, and as a part of the punishment, he held a stick with a thorny end, which he was forced to strike himself on the head with until he bled. This torment continued for 30 days, yet the protests didn't stop. The people were relentless, they wanted justice. Realizing that this punishment wasn't enough to satisfy the enraged population, the Moroccan authorities, at the insistence of the victims' families, decided on a more extreme and final solution. So let's see the horrifying end. The authorities sentenced Al-Masfiwi to a ghastly execution method known as the walling up, meaning burying alive. This method actually was used in the Middle Ages against traitors, as well as in some ancient civilizations such as the Roman civilization and certain Asian societies. So, the walling execution method involved burying the condemned alive within the city's wall. Two masons were assigned the task of constructing an execution cell by chiseling out a narrow hole in the thick walls of the marketplace. The dimensions were terrifying: 61 centimeter deep and wide, about 2 feet, and 180 centimeter high, means about 6 feet, just enough for a man to stand but never escape. I have posted a photo in my video so you can see how people were walled up alive. Actually, I have never heard of this punishment or seen it in any movie. I don't know about you. Back to our story. So, on the day of his execution, Al-Masfiwi believed he was being led out for another day of public humiliation, tied to a donkey as usual. But he quickly realized something was different. He saw thousands upon thousands of people, not just from Marrakesh, but from surrounding villages and cities, all gathered to witness his final punishment. At that moment, he knew this was his day of reckoning. For 30 days, he begged his captors to just end his suffering and execute him, but nothing could have prepared him for what awaited him now. The real shock came when he saw the masons awaiting for him. The masons then chained him to the back wall of the narrow chamber, ensuring he would be unable to move, escape, or even collapse. He was left standing with no food, no water, and no way out. Realizing his fate, Al-Masfiwi screamed for mercy, pleading for a quicker death by hanging instead. As the masons began sealing the opening brick by brick, the people of Marrakesh threw garbage, rotten food, and other filth at him as a final act of revenge for his unspeakable crimes. For 3 days, his desperate screams echoed from inside the wall. But every time he cried out, the crowd outside roared in celebration. By the 3rd day, silence fell. He was left entombed within the walls of the marketplace, a permanent reminder of justice served. What happened to the wicked old woman Rahala? As for Rahala, who lured the girls into Al-Masfiwi's shop, there are no records of her punishment. But one might wonder, what would a 70-year-old woman possibly do with the gold she had accumulated? She didn't even have children to inherit her wealth. In today's world, she could have traveled and enjoyed her money, but in 1906, what could she have really done with it? The moral of the story: never accept drinks from strangers. This story reminded me of a real-life film adaptation. The movie tells the true story of a young girl who, out of kindness, helped a man with a broken arm lift a heavy sofa, only to be abducted and held captive for 13 years. Helping others is a virtue, but we must always be cautious. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and share. Bye.